Welcome, dear participants. My name is Tamara. I'm the manager of the Training Center in Höchberg, Germany, and I'm happy to host for you today the bellavista webinar about the configuration. Our speaker is again Christian Remus, the Senior Global Product Manager. Before we begin with this training, I would like to ask you to open some Webex Tools, please. You find the tools on top of the screen in the drop-down menu. There is the participants icon and the chat icon. Please click on both. That opens up two windows which you can move to the side now, please. In the first window, the participants window, you see on the bottom an icon with a raised hand. When you click on this raised hand, it shows us that you have a question. So whenever there is a question, please click on that raised hand, leave it on until we have our Q&A session, which comes every 10 to 15 minutes here. We are going to unmute you so you can ask your question, and Christian is going to answer it then. When your question was answered, just click on the same link a second time, please, to unmark your hand to lower it. Alternatively, you can also send me your question in the chat window. That's the second window that you have open on your screen now. Send your question, please, to the host. And here also, when we have the Q&A session every 10 to 15 minutes, I'm going to read out your question, and then we're going to answer it. I'm going to record this webinar, and the recording will be available in the Vision Training Center webinar archive. One more thing, please, before we start. At the end of the session, when Christian is done with this training, there is a survey. And in the survey, there are 5 questions. I would like to ask you to answer them, please. We are very interested in your feedback, in your rating about this training here. Thank you very much. That was it from my side. Dear participants, I would like to know now, please, are you ready to start with the training? And if you're ready, then just click on that green check mark, which you find on the bottom of the participants list. So I see that we can start. Yes. Okay, that looks great. Thank you all very much. Now, please unmark that sign. Click on it a second time. I see a raised hand here. Just a moment, please. Andy, what can I do for you? Andy, you are unmuted. Would you like to say something before we start? No, obviously not. If there is anything I can help you with, Andy, then just write me a message in the chat window. And other than that, we are going to start with the class now. Thanks very much, and talk to you later.
Okay. Good morning. Greetings from Switzerland. And today we are talking about, in a more practical, or hopefully practical way, about the configuration ability of bellavista. Bellavista is, as you might already know, very versatile and very configurable, but there might be some things to consider and also some things to know about. So we'll just start right away. When you see here the start screen at the moment, we leave that and start with the configuration of the configuration assist. So I will go through all these parts here that, for example, if you have CO2 or SpO2, and CO2 and SpO2, the alarming is not automatically switched on as soon as you plug in a CO2 or SpO2. We decided for several reasons that it's not always necessary to have an alarm, because you can also use the CO2 and the SpO2 of the bellavista even when the bellavista is in standby. So we thought it's not always necessary to have the alarm always active, but the alarm is by default always disabled, also for the SpO2, and it's also set. In this case, it's off, but also the high leak alarm is an alarm setting which you can adjust here, and or switch it off if you don't want to have a leakage alarm. But before you switch it off, you have to unlock with the padlock, and so you can decide to keep this disabled. There's no use in enable it when you don't use CO2, but when you use CO2 and you enable it, and I haven't plugged in my CO2, you will also see now that the CO2 windows in the alarming window will enlighten. So now these alarms are active. And as soon as you have plugged in CO2, you will get alarms when the CO2 values are out of limits. Same with the SpO2 as well. Next one is the ventilation summary. The bellavista is offering a summary of extubation parameters in one graphic, and here are the settings you can set for the ventilation summary. So if you want to use that, or if customers want to use that, you can, according to the protocol, the standard operation procedure of the hospital, you can set the values here and the limits, and the ventilation summary will switch the timer on when all these values are met. There are 6 values. There are 2 values for oxygenation. There are 3 values for ventilation, and there are also 3 values for spontaneous breathing. So if you set them all in a way that it's reasonable, then the ventilation summary will work and the timer switch on as soon as the patient has reached extubation criteria. This is not part of a profile. We come to a profile in a few minutes, so this is not part of the profile. But when you set these values once, these values will stay. And as soon as you would start ventilation, I can show you that as well. It's not possible to adjust these values again. So you can only readjust or change the values after ventilation or when the ventilator is in standby. Just because that no one can cheat and have a patient in an extubation area where he might not be usually. So that's the reason why you can't adjust it during ventilation. Go back to the config menu. Psi. So if there are clinicians out there who are fond of the psi concept, and you can also set psi in various ways. So you can adjust the psi amplitude, which is unusual because mainly on most ventilators the psi is a fixed setting. And for that reason, we have an advantage here because you can really say, okay, either it's 25% more volume than the set volume, or it's 25% more pressure than the set pressure. If you have a look at it, you can go up to 50% or down to 5%. There is an interval. These are the breaths you see. So every 100 breaths, there would be a psi, but you can go up to 200 or down to 20, just on you to decide, or on the clinician. And then you can also adjust the psi breath so that it's not only 1 psi breath, it can be up to 5 psi breath. And as soon as you have applied, you can switch on the psi, and then you will also see here in the ventilation menu, when you ventilate, that you can enable the psi. And then the psi, and I can show you how this looks like. Just a moment. Very short interval, and just for better visibility, psi breath. And just start the ventilation. And you will see very soon, in about 20 breaths, that the psi will show up. Now you see those, the curve is filled, but it's kind of striped. And this is showing that the psi is now working, and you also see a higher pressure here.
Question, one moment, please. I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you. There seems to be a box open in the middle of your screen. Can you please move that to the side? Yes. Great. Thank you very much.
Okay, so if we wait for another few breaths, you will see again the psi interval. should come now. Let's see at the settings. Turn breath. Okay, there it is. So now you see 45% more pressure, and now this is somehow filled, but not the same as it would be a triggered breath. There are stripes in it, so you can separate between sigh breath and triggered breath. Okay, I will switch off the sigh again and go back to configuration assist. Here you can switch between auxiliary and esophageal monitoring. So if you have the esophageal pressure option, usually the default would be esophageal pressure. But it might be useful if you maybe want to have another auxiliary pressure measured, like abdominal pressure or like cuff pressure. And here you can switch between esophageal pressure, and you see as soon as you deactivate this measurement, there is only auxiliary pressure, so there's only a curve and no monitoring parameters, but you have an additional pressure, and it's not the esophageal pressure here. Here is the ATC availability. So if the hospital is not using ATC at all, you can just disable it, and then it will never show up anywhere, and it's really gone. Here you have the O2 functions. So this is also something which happens from time to time. When the oxygen sensor is not working correctly anymore, the oxygen sensor can't be calibrated anymore, and it's Saturday night at 2 o'clock, and there is no replacement sensor available, you want to carry on with your ventilation and also having no alarms during ventilation. So there's the opportunity that you say, okay, I will totally disable the O2 monitoring. So that means I have an alternative means of oxygen monitoring, but there is no oxygen measurement coming from the bellavista anymore. And this means that the oxygen mixer is looking at a relation between air and oxygen, but it's not connected anymore. And you see, if you have the FiO2 value on the cockpit, you also see that the air is switched off. So this can be done as a emergency, but as soon as you have replaced the defective sensor, I would encourage you to enable this again. Also, if you want to use oxygen concentrator or low pressure oxygen, you can switch here between high and low pressure. And that means, so as soon as you have switched to a low pressure source, you have to switch here. And in the same moment, because on low pressure sources, you will never reach 100% oxygen, you also have to switch below 100% oxygen. Otherwise, it doesn't work correctly. And there is also the opportunity to have an external O2 blender on the ventilator. I think this will be gone very soon. So you only have to choose between 100% and below 100% oxygen. And also not available during ventilation, you can adjust the neonatal O2 suction concentration and the O2 suction duration. So for adult and pediatric, the O2 suction is always 100% oxygen and 2 minutes time, while on neonatal you can adjust to the increment, how much the oxygen will be increased, and the duration can be switched between 60 to 120 seconds. But of course, the O2 suction is always, can always be disabled by just pressing the button again. Nebulizer. We have several breath phases you can adjust for the nebulizer: inspiratory, expiratory, and continuous. And you can also set the duration from 5 minutes to infinite. So you really can say, I want to have nebulization on a constant basis. So this is possible here, and this can be adjusted. And this is also a persistent setting. So this is also not part of the profile. So you have to do it once. It will stay there as long as you not change it, but it won't be part of the profile that you can adjust several profiles with several types of nebulization. Here we come to the units chapter. So you can switch between millibar, centimeter of water, and hectopascal on the pressure monitoring. Pressure input is bar, kilopascal, or PSI. CO2 can be switched between percent, millimeter mercury, kilopascal, hectopascal. Height can be switched between centimeter, feet, and inches. We are working on a setting that we have a default setting that wherever this ventilator is shipped, that already the units will be automatically defaulted, but it's a bit complicated because in some areas clinicians are using several types. So hopefully we get this done, but it makes things a bit easier. And also this one set is staying in the ventilator until it's changed again. And then we have the user interface. You can, I can't show you this on screen because it doesn't work on screen, but you can now set the brightness of the screen, the sound volume of the alarm. Then, because we have ventilation running, go back again. Here is the night mode. So on the night mode or for the night mode, you can adjust the screen brightness, the alarm light brightness, and the sound volume. And if you switch on the night mode, which you currently can't see on the screen, it will give you a dimmed light, alarm lights, and alarm volume. So during the night, everything is a bit more calm on the ventilator. After 12 hours, it automatically switches on day mode again, or you can do it manually all the time. Languages. We offer 27 languages for the bellavista inside the software, so there should be enough languages for everyone. And here is also the user level. So that, okay, so I can do anything, I have access to everything, I can configure, I can do whatever I want. But if I would say I want to have another user level because I have configured the ventilator now, and so nobody should touch the configuration after this, you can, for example, go back to clinical, and then the ventilator starts up always with clinical, so that no configurations can be adjusted. Patient cockpit locked. So if you go for the, I have to just say, oh, the patient cockpit is locked. So there is here in the default user level, there is this patient cockpit, and if you're going for home care, this is coming from the home care side, you can lock the patient cockpit so that the patient can touch everything, but nothing's happened. But you can also unlock this feature. Here you can set the default screen delay. So that means currently the default screen is cockpit. After 30 seconds, it switches automatically back to the cockpit. If you want to switch that off, there is it doesn't work anymore. So, or you can go to 60 seconds. So that means either you stay with the screen where you are, or you go back to the cockpit after 30 or after 60 seconds. So we'll go back to 60 seconds. And you can also choose the default screen. So you can say, I don't want to have the cockpit as a default screen. I would rather go for the monitoring, and you can choose this here as well. Last but not least, Periphery. I'm currently using a bellavista 1000E, so I don't have to switch between the SPU2 interface or the HL7 Philips interface because I have a third port. So I have directly access to the data management systems. And here you can decide between HL7 or IntelliBridge Viewlink for direct connection to Philips monitoring. Or, and I can also, but this is more for the experts coming from the software companies, the send interval for the HL7 message. So that means in this case, bellavista is sending every 50 seconds or every 35 seconds or every 60 seconds one message to the data management system. And that's a setting the software guys need for their data management system because some systems only can receive settings every 60 seconds. So that's on them to decide what the send interval would be. Okay, that's the configuration assist.
Thank you very much, Christian. Maybe it's a good time now to stop for a first Q&A session. I would already have a question, and this is coming from Anthony, please. In ventilation summary, how is the minimum volume and maximum volume setting measured when not using AVM mode?
When not using AVM mode? So you mean...
Wait a second, please. I'm going to unmute Anthony so he can speak with you. Just a second. Anthony, please. Anthony?
Hello?
Yes, Anthony?
Good morning.
No.
So,
Good morning.
So the two sense minute volume parameters, I'm used to using them only with AVM. In non-AVM modes, how are they calculated?
Oh, it's not that complicated because you have to always give in the height of the patient, and the same system like on AVM. So a 70 kilo patient would be 100% with 7 liters minute volume, and as we measure the minute volume all the time, it's either in this case 250 might be a bit high. But if we go for the default value 150, it would work on the upper limit 10.5 liter. And on the lower limit, it would be, for example, with 50%, 3.5 liter. Because that's the reason why you have to type the height of the patient in the vent summary. So it knows the ideal body weight and the estimated minute volume, and then it just calculates percentage-wise up or down.
Super, thank you.
Good,
okay.
Anthony, thanks for your question. The next one is coming from Saeed, please. What is below percentage O2? How far does it go when LPO is activated?
The low percentage, I think 21%. So if I understand the question right, but so there, we just say as soon as you have a low pressure, it's starting by 0. So you don't need any pressure at all, you just need some flow. And then the only thing you have to say is that it's clear that this oxygen source won't reach 100% oxygen, and then everything is set. But the minimal flow, I guess, an oxygen concentrator is providing is around 4 liters. So I think this is the minimal amount. But if it's below that, maybe I have to answer that later. I think it would be an alarm also when the flow is just too low on this. But I think it would start already with 4 liters of flow.
Thanks, Anna. I just received the addition. How much FiO2 will be delivered maximum?
That's depending on the oxygen concentrator. So as the bellavista can't generate oxygen by himself, that's on the oxygen generator. So there are oxygen generators which generate 80 to 85%, some more, I think the highest ones are 94%. That's really up to the oxygen generator or concentrator.
Good. And now there's one last question before we continue. It's coming from Jonathan. Will there be connectivity to other ICU interfaces, in particular GE centricity?
We have centricity. So what we currently not really pursuing is connection to monitoring, because connection to monitoring is very limited. And that's the reason why we have HL7. So HL7 has a centricity connection already, and we have now today already 10 or 11 data management systems connected. But the Philips Ulink IntelliBridge is the only system where we have direct access to a monitor. But most companies now, and most companies have a longer history than we have. They had 20 years ago or even longer, they had to connect to a monitor, and now still they're benefiting for it. But direct connection to monitors is a bit more complicated than direct connection to a data management system. So centricity is already connected. We are currently looking into connection of many other systems. But this is a process we can't influence very much, because the priority is set up by the data management company. But we will have, I think, in 1 month or more than 1 month, we will have a capsule connection for bellavista. And as soon as you have capsule, you also have access to many other data management systems. But we don't, and this is for all distributors which are listening, try to get the conversation to directly connect to the data management system and not to the monitors. Because there are lots of pitfalls when you go to the monitors, and there are some companies which are not doing this anymore. They also say that we only directly connect. So if there is a hospital which has a system since 25 years and they have ever connected it to a monitor, maybe try to deviate the conversation into something that they should directly connect to the data management system.
All right. Mohammed would like to know, please, how do we calculate the oxygen content when we use the blender? And does the valve stop working?
When you use the blender, which is still available but won't be available soon, bellavista is doing nothing. You just adjust everything at the blender.
Many thanks. Sue would like to know now, please, can we connect to PICIS?
Yes, we can.
Good. What is the maximum acceptable leak percentage during use of the AVM mode? This question is coming from Khalid.
It's where you set it, but of course the bellavista would, or the AVM would maybe struggle if you set 100%. AVM would start to work and you won't get leakage alarms, but you will see that AVM is not working properly at the moment. So it's not about what percentage of leakage. So AVM can cope with some leakage as long as the leakage is constant, but mostly this is not the case. So if there is a variable leakage, you will have problems in getting the desired minute volume. But this is very much independent from having alarms or not. Of course, when the leakage is too high, you will get a disconnection alarm, and this is totally independent from the leakage setting.
All right, now I would like to ask a last question before we continue. It is from Jan. Is it compatible with WPA2 PSK network protocol?
Whatever you ask me, it will always be compatible because we use HL7. So HL7 is a universal language. Every data management company can work with HL7 nowadays. interesting question is, does this company have a driver for bellavista or not? So if a customer is asking you, can you connect with XYZ, you can say for sure yes, because we have HL7. The next question is, do we have this driver already or this connection established already or not? That's the interesting question. So the software you told me, never heard of that before. So if there is a customer who wants to connect, get back to me, come back to me, and I will connect with the company and set up a process for developing a driver. But some companies, and that's the situation we face nowadays, and maybe this will change during the situation we have, they only start working when they get a direct order from the customer. So as long as you don't have the connection, they do nothing. So even if I would throw lots of money at them, they don't start any process. So if there is a question, can you connect to XYZ? And I just mean the data management systems, not the monitors. Monitor is a total different story. But the data management system, you can surely say, yes, we have HL7, and this is a universal key to any data management system. Next question, do we have this connection already? Yes, no. If no, we have to connect with the company and then start the driver development.
Thank you very much, Christian. We can now continue with the training. Thanks.
Okay, so now we have the configuration assist set up, and on the same page, you also see the data assist. Here you can create, delete, load profiles, and profiles come in very handy because you can, or the customer, the user can adjust a default setting for his ventilator to start with for certain occasions, like for example, you could set, for example, you could set up a CPR profile associated and an ARDS profile, you name it. So any situation, and I also had the opportunity to create profiles for certain clinicians. So Dr. A wanted to have his profile and Dr. B wanted to have the next profile. And so there is no limit to profiles. So you can set up to 20 different profiles. And this is very easy to do. So I just go through it. So I would like to create an NIV profile. So I say, okay, I choose NIV. I want to do this NIV profile with the, for example, A circuit. Then I choose a ventilation mode, which is working with the A circuit. Choose the pressure support I want to have. I will stay at the, I have all the auto settings. Inspiration time should be 2 seconds maximum. And I want to start with a PEEP of 8. Then I go into the cockpit. I would like to have for my profile, for example, the animated lung. I need the flow, and I leave it like this. And I also can configure certain values, like I would like to see the inspiratory pressure here. I have the tidal volume, PEEP, I2E, that looks all good to me. I can do maybe here FiO2. Or go for the SpO2 for this patient. And I want to see the ventilation mode here as well. So okay, and last but not least, and this is something very useful, you can also configure the alarms in this profile. So you go, whatever you like to set here, you can also disable the alarming and go for a higher apnea time and go for a higher respiratory rate, for example. And now when I have set everything to my liking, so I say, okay, that's fine. I go back to the data assist and now save this profile. So I will just call it NIV, apply this profile. So if I have now sold 25 ventilators to that hospital, and the clinician was telling me, okay, I want to have 3 profiles, please do them all identical on all ventilators. You can plug in a USB, you already see the USB, and just export all the profiles which are on the ventilator. So I would always recommend to have one ventilator, create all the profiles needed, plug in the USB, export the profiles, and you see that currently on the ventilator there are 7 different profiles. Then you can unplug the USB, and if you plug it in the next ventilator, which has no profile at the moment, you can just import them again, and so every ventilator has the profiles. And the identical profiles, so by doing it manually, there would be always failures and mistakes, but now you have just one USB or as many USBs you want, and you can easily and quickly configure the profiles for every ventilator. So we'll unplug this again. And now I go back to the start screen, and here on the first panel I see this configure profile. Configure this. There is already my NIV profile setting, and now the button is there. And whenever I go to this button, you will see that things are setting up like I wanted to have it. I can go into the cockpit. There are all the settings which I made, and also all the alarming settings. So that means even if I go to new patient again, and I switch to the E circuit, for example, as soon, and go to invasive, as soon as I press this button here, everything changes. You can create up to 20 profiles on the bellavista. On the first page you can display 3, but as soon as you press that button, you see the whole list, and you can go, for example, for the SIB target. And it's also possible to go into B modes, for example, target modes, and create the profile. As soon as you press the target, you see on the bullseye here that it had switched between the regular mode and the B mode target, and so everything is set for this patient. So this is what you can do with the profile. What's important to know, there are some things which are not loaded and set into the profile. I get this question quite often, because sometimes users want to configure this screen as well, the Manoeuvre Screen, and the default for the Manoeuvre Screen is pressure, flow, volume. And you can configure this screen, and it will be a persistent setting, so it will stay forever, but it won't be taken over into the profile. So if you want to have a screen like this, and I say, okay, I just need PAV and volume, for example, or I would like to see, for example, esophageal pressure, you can configure this, and this will stay. Profile. The same is with trending. So if you configure the trending here, okay, I don't need trending for FiO2, I don't need trending for inspiratory resistance, I don't need trending for rate. Once you have done this, it will stay forever this way, but it won't be taken over in the profile. So you can't do different trending configurations in different profiles. You can just do one with a persistent setting, but this has to be done manually on every ventilator, so it's not part of the profile. Okay, configuration, and now we go a bit deeper. Leave the user level and go into the service level. You will see there is a password available within your distribution. And so there are lots of buttons, but the only two buttons which should interest you are the modes and circuit buttons. And if you press this one, you can enable and disable nearly all ventilation modes. The only ventilation modes you can't disable are the ventilation modes which are backup modes, so they can't be disabled, like PAC, for example. But you will be able to disable, for example, all of the circuits you don't need. You can switch the correct NC-PUB generator, either if it's the infant flow or the Medijet. And you can switch between ICU and IMC modes. So if this ventilator is mainly used for non-invasive ventilation, you can switch to IMC mode, and then there will be the naming. And if I go here, you see that now all the ICU names, ventilation mode names are disabled, and now S, ST, and T will be activated, but you can also activate ICU-like modes. So it's up to the hospital which modes they want to have activated. And I have hospitals, like here in Switzerland, they have only activated 3 ventilation modes because they don't work with more than that. And that comes in quite handy because it really spares confusion. So once you have done this, this will also stay forever. So you don't have to redo this after restart. So this is also a persistent setting. When you have done this and you want to have this stored in the ventilator, you have to restart the ventilator. So if you just go back to your menu, it didn't happen. So like I will do now. So if I go back and log off, I will go back to the screen here, but I still have the ventilation circuits or breathing circuits available. So I really have to restart if this should be really stored in the ventilator. Okay, that was a short introduction into the possible configurations of the bellavista. And if you have questions, you can start now with them.
Send me your question either in the chat window, please, or click on the raised hand in the participants list. So here is a question coming from Ankur. Excuse me. In the bellavista, the performance of the B-level BiPAP on a single limb circuit and a double link circuit is the same or different. In case of single limb, the exhalation is done through the mask, whereas in double limb, it is through the expiration limb to expiratory valve of the ventilator.
It depends. So if you go on NIV, and I think the single limb you were talking was the A circuit, you will see that some modes are not available. So if you would like to do on the A circuit B level, it just doesn't work already from the beginning. If you would choose, for example, the D circuit, which is a single limb mode with flow sensor, it has the 100% identical performance to the E circuit, to the dual limb circuit. So it really depends on what type of circuit you're working with. If you want to choose the C circuit, you don't have exhalation monitoring or expiratory monitoring, and that means this is also not for life-sustaining ventilation. And so there are different types of single limb. So if you're talking about the A single limb, B level wouldn't be available. And if you talk about the D, it has 100% the same performance as the E or dual limb circuit.
All right. Then I have a question from Sabnil, please. What is enable XPC bypassing? What does it do?
Nothing to your interest. This is some engineer button, and I would really highly recommend if you go into that menu, don't press button you don't know anything about, because you can really decalibrate the ventilator and do damage to the ventilator. So I get a lot of questions like this, but this is for field service and they get a separate training, so I just understand that I don't answer questions like this on this webinar.
Okay, good, Christian, thank you. Timo would like to know, please, how do I start HFOT on the bellavista?
Good question, thank you. So if you have a new patient, you start up the ventilator, you go for HFOT, you get some advice that you have to have a humidified circuit, you have that the ventilation alarms are suppressed, and you should always use SpO2 monitoring. And it's not meant that you have to use the bellavista SpO2 monitoring. It's meant that there should be SpO2 monitoring around, because I also got questions that people thought now it has to be the SpO2 monitoring of the bellavista. It does not have to be that one. And if I have read this and can confirm that everything is okay, I see the HFOT screen. And what we did on purpose is that it's not possible to, as soon as you have started HFOT, I will just start HFOT, go back to 21%. So now HFOT is already running. You see that the alarms are suppressed. So because now the ventilator is just delivering flow, nothing else than flow. So there are no alarms here, and I currently just let the flow into the room. So there is no circuit on the ventilator, and the ventilator can't detect how HFOT is applied. So that's the reason why the alarms will always be suppressed. So now you can adjust the flow from 2 liters up to 80 liters. And there's also a ramp where you can say, stop this again, where you can say, okay, I want to have 40 liters for this patient, but to give the humidifier time to warm up and also give the patient time to adapt to the flow, I can set the ramp to 10 minutes. And if I start now, the ventilator doesn't start with 40 liters, it just starts with 15% of 40 liters. And then it ramps up in 10 minutes to 40 liters. So in 10 minutes, when the full flow is applied, the humidifier already has warmed up. If the situation is in a way that the patient is in need of 40 liters immediately, you can just deactivate the ramp, and then it will be 40 liters immediately. You have the oxygen setting, and this is all to say about HFOT. The one thing which is important, and this is on purpose as well, you can't slide anywhere. You can't go back to the ventilation as long as HFOT is running. You can't go back to the start screen. It's disabled as long as HFOT is running. Just didn't want to mix up between regular ventilation mode and high flow. High flow is no ventilation, it's an oxygen therapy. So we wanted to have this separated as much as possible. And only when you stop high flow, then the start screen button is active again, and you can go back to the start screen and start ventilation if high flow was not sufficient and go on with the ventilation.
Okay, thank you. And can you now please show us how to lock the screen so that settings won't be changed? This is a question from Sabnil, please.
So when you have decided to go, for example, everything is adjusted, everything is fine, all your profiles are in place, all the monitoring is done, you can go to the user level, and currently advanced level is granted. Now you decide to go to clinical. So in first sight it looks quite identical, but now you see there are, the configuration assist is gone. So this button is not available anymore. So the configuration assist is gone, and some other buttons as well where you can configure the system. So if you go into the cockpit, Everything looks the same here as well, but you can't change those parameters anymore. These are locked also. But the only thing and the one thing you have to do is that in the configuration assistant, therefore I have to get back to advanced again, I have to define the level when I restart the ventilator. So I can now switch to clinical, and it looks fine, but when you start the ventilator again, it goes back to advanced. So if you want to have ventilator going to clinical, with every restart, then you have to do it here in the configuration assist. And going back here to, for example, the patient level, you only see those 5 buttons left, which you can adjust, so it's even more restricted here. But if you go to the cockpit, there is not even waveforms, it's just a watch, and when the ventilation is running, the lung is inflating and deflating. So you can do it directly, but if you want to have it persistently and consistently, you have to adjust this in the configuration assist.
Thank you. And Timo was adding, I might have missed that in the beginning, so I just ask again. No problem, Timo. The machine will ask if I want to start HFOT whenever I start a new patient?
As soon, there is no other way. As soon as you press that HFOT button, the information window will always pop up. So there's no shortcut to that. You always have that information window to confirm.
All right, thanks. Rex would like to know, please, can bellavista connect through Wi-Fi?
As today, the bellavista 1000E can't, but before COVID-19, we were on to release a dedicated non-invasive. This will be now later this year, bellavista, and this bellavista already has Wi-Fi functionality. And as soon as we see this as useful and people are using it, it won't be a problem to integrate it in all bellavistas.
Good, thanks. Next question is coming from Subnir. Can we bypass the circuit test?
Yeah, like this. Just start ventilation. You will never be asked for the circuit test. You can always start ventilation. You can always bypass the circuit test anytime you want. But this is locked. So if there are issues with the ventilation, if there are problems, if there is wrong monitoring, anything, we will know if the circuit test has been done or not. So there is no chance to say, yeah, I did the circuit test all the time. You can bypass it because for emergency use, you don't want to do 2 minutes while the patient is in need of a ventilator. So you can always skip the circuit test, and you can always cancel the circuit test even if it's running, but this will all be locked. So we know if the circuit test has been done or not. So we highly recommend to do a circuit test at least with each new flow sensor, circuit, or patient.
Thank you, Christian. And I see a box in the middle of your screen again. Can you close that, please, so we can see the full monitor? Good. So here is a raised hand from Stephen Chow. Stephen, you are unmuted. Would you like to ask your question, Stephen? Stephen Chow, please. No. Okay, Stephen, no problem. If you have a question, just send it to me in the chat window. And we are continuing now with a question from Sue. Can we have a separate software option for animated lung instead of the clinical suite, which is very pricey?
The animated lung is not an option. So the animated lung is in each and every bellavista ordered. So you don't have to order the lung because it's part of the standard package, like the vent summary as well, and like AVM, for example. So it's not necessary to make an option out of it because it's already standard.
All right. Sayi is asking, While changing the mode of ventilation to a particular patient, maybe from HFOT to invasive or to NIV, one we need to stop the ventilation. Is there any significance doing this?
Not sure if I understand the question. So maybe you can specify a bit.
I can repeat it if that helps. Or maybe I can unlock Saeed just a moment in the participant list. Here we go. Saeed, would you like to ask your question? The microphone doesn't seem to work. Okay. Saeed, it would be nice if you could repeat your question in the chat, please. And I'm continuing here with the next one that is coming from Sven. Is the selection, active humidification, and HMI filter new? What changes with the bellavista?
This is currently only available in the US, so internationally we don't have that selection. It's just that the flow sensor for better accuracy, if the flow sensor knows that the air is already warmed up with active humidification, we have now a better accuracy during active humidification. That's the only thing that's doing. So currently we don't have that switch, so we are looking for non-active humidification and have accuracy there. But if the air is warmed up, then we have a higher uncertainty, and this is just to remove the uncertainty.
Mohammed would like to know, please, when doctors use USB, do you need to be USB bellavista ready?
It depends. If you want to have the log files of the ventilator, you have to have a USB ready stick. If you just want to do some trending data, some profiles, screenshots, the stick doesn't have to be bellavista ready.
All right. And here comes the question again from Saeed. Why do we need to stop the ventilation for changing from invasive to NIV or to HFOT?
Because it's for HFOT, it's on purpose. We just want that there is no mix-up between oxygen therapy and non-invasive and invasive. There are other competitors out there which have HFOT in the same panel as any other ventilation mode, and we just thought there is no alarming at all. So if someone is starting the ventilation and unfortunately presses the HFOT button, there won't be an alarm to make people aware that this patient is not ventilated at the moment. So HFOT, we wanted to have it totally separated. And interestingly, the FDA in the USA didn't clear companies currently which don't have that separation at the moment. So luckily we were right from the beginning, because the FDA cleared our HFOT feature. Like other companies which had the HFOT in the whole panel, they weren't cleared because of that, because this could be dangerous to mix up. For non-invasive, invasive, many ventilators have one non-invasive mode. So it's easy to switch to just that non-invasive mode. But as long as we are offering all ventilation modes, or nearly all pressure controlled modes for non-invasive as well, I think this would lead to confusion, because then we would have a very long panel with non-invasive, invasive modes, and sometimes people wouldn't know the difference anymore. So we did this on purpose, that usually you have to extubate a patient, then the patient is not ventilated at least for some seconds, and then you have to put on the mask of the patient again. And this is, even when you're fast, can't be done in less than 10, 15 seconds. So there is enough time to switch the ventilator from invasive to non-invasive.
Good, thanks, Christian. Can you please explain us now the function of the bacteria filter on the exit of the device? Mohammed would like to know this, please.
The function of the bacteria filter on the exit of the device. So on the inspiration side.
Mohammed, maybe you would like to repeat your question? So I'm waiting here for another message.
So about filters in general, because this is currently a hot topic, because how to use filters, which filters to use, what are the correct filters during the pandemic. We recommend to have a filter on the inspiratory side. Either that filter is at the patient and it's an HMEF, so you don't have to have a second filter on the inspiratory side because the patient already has a filter. If you use active humidification, we recommend for the protection of the ventilator to have a filter at the inspiratory outlet, because if some humidity or fluid from the chamber will go up the ventilator by disassembling the ventilator, just behind that inspiratory interface, inspiratory outlet, there is directly the inspiratory block and the inspiratory valve. So if some fluid or water comes into that, your ventilator is broken. So there, and you have to replace a $2,500 inspiratory valve. So that's the reason to put on a 50-cent filter just to protect the ventilator. The next question is, what do I do with the expiratory side? Technically, it's not necessary to have a filter at the expiratory side for bellavista. So there is no way that bellavista would need a filter there. There are ventilators out there which have an expiratory filter, and this makes, especially nowadays, sense because you don't want to disperse viral load from a patient to another. So if the customer wants to put a filter on the expiratory side, it increases the work of breathing, but it would protect healthcare professionals and other patients from a virus potentially. So there's also no problem to put a filter on the expiratory side. If you want to go for 100%, you can also put a HEPA filter on the air inlet of the ventilator, and this HEPA filter would prevent that the ventilator is somehow contaminated inside with the virus. We haven't tested this in case of the coronavirus, but inside the ventilators they are quite high temperature, and so we would assume that it's very hard for a virus to survive inside the ventilator. But if the customer wants to be 100% sure that no virus is coming inside the ventilator, it would also be possible to attach a HEPA filter on the air inlet as well. So then you would be 100% protected. So there is no viral contamination on the expiratory side. You have protected the ventilator with a filter on the inspiratory side against fluid ingress, and you have protected the ventilator from viral contamination inside the ventilator. Maybe that answers your questions a bit.
Thank you, Christian. I would like to continue with Nila's question now, please. In HFOT mode, I'm unable to take a screenshot of the screen. How do I take it in any other option?
You can take a screenshot from here. So it's always possible to take a screenshot. And if you go here on the main menu on this button, you can take a screenshot as well.
Thanks for showing us this. Liesel would like to know, on trending, can you see digital values for a selected time frame?
Yes. I'm not sure if I'm 100% right, but as soon as you put this out, you see all the numbers. and then you can just cursor whatever value you want to look for, and the second one will give you the time frame, if this is the question you were asking.
Thank you. Now Timo is asking, can you maybe quickly run us through the process of setting up a new pressure-controlled ventilation like BiPAP as if when a new patient is admitted?
Okay. So I start up the ventilator, there is new patient. So either I already have a BiPAP or bi-level, B-level profile. Just have to look if there is some existing. No, unfortunately not. So I can just say, okay, there is a new patient. This patient is an adult patient. I can decide if I want to type in the height, because animated lung and vent summary would directly work. I have to decide going for non-invasive or invasive. I would now decide to have this as an invasive patient. I decide to choose the dual limb circuit because this is a heated one. Then I do the circuit test, which I would like to skip now. Then I go for PAC, which is the standard mode, choose B level. Then set up high, set up the PEEP, then have the pressure support rate, go a bit higher than that. The T high would be 1.2 seconds. Flow trigger is fine. I would go for the auto trigger. Rise time is fine. And the oxygen, not to have alarm, I would set to 21%. So if I'm fine with all these settings, I would just start the ventilation now. And even from here, during the process is running and the patient is already ventilated, I can go into the datasys and directly save this profile as well. So for the next patient or for the next situation where you would need a BiPAP, you can already choose to do a profile on the fly. Now the ventilation is running. I can do my settings here. If I want to change the ventilation mode, I go back to the settings assist, go for example to PSV and adjust the next mode.
Okay, thanks very much for showing us this. Sahi would like to know, Savina 300 Select offers separate button like ours for HFOT, or HFOT is enlisted among all the other modes it offers, from the Draeger, I believe.
So what is the question?
Sahi, would you like to rephrase your question and send it to me again, please? I'm sorry. What about Draeger Savina 300 Select HFOT? It offers separate buttons like ours.
Yeah.
Is there a separate button for HFOT?
Yes, there is. So Draeger is already, and Draeger is one of the few which also have been cleared in the US because they also have separated between HFOT and ventilation. Yes.
Thank you very much, Christian. And I don't see other questions. Dear participants, if you have a question, then please send it to me in the chat window now, please, or raise your hand. We're just waiting another minute here before we stop. Good, here's one coming. Thank you. Jin May is asking, can you please brief us setting up the vent summary, if not explained, as I could join late in the session?
Yes, I can, but there will also be in, I think, this week or next week, instruction video on the YR's webpage and the YouTube channel. But I can do a quick run through to the settings here. So if you choose the ventilation summary, and there's nothing we choose. This is all up to the hospital. And I also maybe recommend here and then if someone is asking me, but I would be very cautious to recommend settings which are not aligned with the standard procedures of the hospital or the guidelines for extubation they have. So if a hospital has a guideline for extubation or spontaneous breathing trial, and in Europe, for example, most hospitals now are forced to have extubation guidelines by the authorities. So this might be different in other parts of the world, but every ICU has some measures to find a patient ready for extubation or spontaneous breathing trial. And you just have to ask, what are your measures? And if you go, for example, for the oxygen, so at some point, no patient will ever be extubated when he's on 100% oxygen. Mainly, the oxygen level is between 21 and 40% for patients to be extubated or having a spontaneous breathing trial. So what you do here is to give the maximum oxygen allowed for this ICU. So they say we extubate patient when the oxygen level is 30%, 35%, 28%. So the only thing you have to do is just type in this value. Next one is the PEEP. Ask the clinician, at what PEEP do you extubate patient? And he probably won't say, we extubate at any PEEP. So they say the patient has to be below 10, below 8, at 5. So you just adjust a certain level, and you say, okay, the level has to be 5. Then we go up for the minute volume. So if a patient has a high minute volume, this could have two reasons mainly. Either he has a lot of CO2 to exhale, so there's a lot of CO2 production still in the patient, especially on COPD patients, and the inspiratory pressure or the pressure support is set too high. So if a patient is breathing on 15 centimeters of water pressure support, he will likely produce a lot of minute volume, and maybe he doesn't need that minute volume. So this ventilation adjustments say, okay, he should have a minimum minute volume, and I would go along the alarm limit you set, that you see, okay, I have alarm limit of 4 liters. This is a 70 kilo patient, so 100% would be 8 liters. So he should at least breathe 50% of that a minimum minute volume of 4 liters is accepted. And he shouldn't go below 150, 170, 180. This is up to the clinician to decide. But it will be very difficult if you set here 150 and the inspiration pressure is accepted at 50. So you will never get that timer to work. So this should be aligned. But I think this is sometimes a process because most clinicians don't know about the concept of this minute volume. So this is maybe something they have to work with and get some experience. The same with the inspiratory maximum pressure. That means what pressure support or at what inspiratory pressure would you like to have your patient on a TP's trial or a spontaneous breathing trial or extubated. So usually this would be in a range of 8 to 12. I will choose 10 now. And now we have the RSBI, and I think everyone is familiar with the concept of RSBI on the upper level. So that means currently the numbers are either 105 for lung healthy patients, and if you have a COPD patient, it should be a bit below that. So the numbers are varying between 80 and 105. I will keep this at 105. And the RSBI shouldn't be too low, because this would also mean that the patient is maybe doing only sigh breathing with a very, very few, very large tidal volumes, and you want to prevent that as well. And then at the end, last but not least, is the percentage of spontaneous breathing. And of course, because I want to extubate the patient should breathe a very high level on its own. If it's 90%, 95 or 99%, but I would just set this value very high. And if you have applied all of this and you go into the cockpit, start your ventilation. I go to the vent summary to see that the oxygen already is green, because I have a PEEP of 5 and the oxygen of 21%, so I'm within my limits. But the ventilation is yellow, and that's because of the reason the pressure support is still too high. So that means I set 10, so the pressure support is 12. If I go down to 9, it will change to green as well, because now I have set the pressure support within the limit. Maybe I have to go a bit lower. And the spontaneous breathing is currently still yellow, even red. I will switch to animated lung. You also see on the animated lung on the side here that there is a spontaneous breathing activity. This is currently 54%, so it ramps up. We can also have a look at the RSBI. And now the timer is on. Because all criteria are met now, and as long as the patient is in that window, the timer will carry on with measurement. And now when you enter the room, you already see that the patient is ready for a spontaneous breathing trial or for extubation. But still, there is no time I would recommend to say, okay, when the timer is up to 15, 25, or 45 minutes, you can extubate. It really depends on the overall state and condition of the patient. So there might be a patient which is brain dead. You probably won't extubate them even if the timer is running. And there are patients which are already having a conversation with you and the timer is not on. So it's really up to the clinician to decide when to use and how to use the vent summary.
All right, thanks very much. I would like to continue now with a question from Timo. What data can you access in the expert monitoring?
All data we have to offer. So with all the sensoring, I think we have currently around 70 monitoring parameters, and all of them would be available here, but only when you have the small tiles in use. Otherwise, there's not enough space for it. So all the data, all the parameters you see here can be available at a glance on the expert monitoring. And I have a second page here where I have all loops and additional monitoring data and curves available in the monitoring as well.
Thank you, Christian, for this explanation. ATEV would like to know what is the difference between flow trigger and expiration trigger?
Oh, I think we have this on the Synchrony webinar, because this is something I could explain now, but I think we're starting to run out of time. There will be soon a synchrony webinar explaining all the different triggers and the auto functions, and I would encourage you to attend there, because then you get a very fond and complete explanation about that.
Yes, and we are going to send out invitations by email then about new sessions that are coming up here on our bellavista devices as webinars soon. A last question is coming from Mohammed. What is the maximum time the device works continuously, and what maintenance is done for the device if it turns out that it has been working on a patient without separation?
I don't know. We have still running ventilators in our cellar, in our headquarters here in Switzerland. I think one ventilator is now running more than 3 years without any break. We have some home care patients which are really dependent on the ventilator, where the bellavista is running 24 hours, 7 days a week. And so we haven't found out how long the bellavista is able to work continuously, because there is no time limit. You have to have an annual maintenance once a year. So I think that defines the break. So at least 1 year, the ventilator will run without any problems. But it's also depending on the conditions. If you would like to have the bellavista working on 45 degrees in the hot sun, there might be issues. So I'm talking just about having this in an environment where the bellavista is able to work at, so not under extreme conditions. And so we have bellavista running on patient and also for engineering for a very long time without any interruption.
Thank you. A question from Timo. What is the maneuver section for? Does that mean nebulization, etc.?
No. Nebulization is on the cockpit. On the maneuver screen, you have hold function, you have the recruitment function. So all maneuvers you can do with the patient, either it's an in or expiratory hold, they are available here. And you get all the values on this page as well. And if you want to do a recruitment maneuver or an assessment maneuver, you can do it on the maneuver page as well. But we have had a webinar about lung recruitment. This webinar is already available on Vision. So you get more insight on the maneuver page if you download this webinar.
Thanks, Christian. A question from our colleague Pankaj. What is the lifetime of the turbine we offer as a company?
We have 5 years guarantee on the turbine, and there is 8 years life expectancy of the ventilator. And now first ventilators with the turbine we're currently using are reaching the 8 years lifetime now. So we could think about giving a lifetime guarantee on the turbine as well. But currently it's 5 years, but the life expectancy is higher, and we don't connect the 5 years to any operating hours. So we just say the turbine is good for 5 years of use, because some competitors say, yeah, either 5 years or 20,000 hours. We just say 5 years.
So 5 years, okay, thanks a lot. That was a question from Pankaj. And now Kamlesh would like to know what is the practical size of nebulization?
The practical side, yeah, it's to deliver drugs into the lung. There are different ways to do it. bellavista offers an inbuilt pneumatic nebulizer. You can also get the respiratory system a bit more humidified. Doesn't work too well, but some still do it with just some saline. But mainly nebulization is a concept to get drugs into human body over ventilation. This can be also done with a mesh nebulizer, which has a more detailed or particles, smaller particle size, so it might be more effective. But the main and I would say nearly only reason is to administer drugs to the patient.
Next one, Sahi is asking, is there a recommendation for the set of filters PM kit to be replaced on monthly basis? In case of continuous working of the machine, how do we replace the filters then? Can those be replaced once the machine is free?
Oh, they can be replaced during operation. So there's no reason to replace the filter only when the machine is not running. So there's no downtime necessary for the ventilator just by exchanging the filters.
Good. And then Kamlesh would like to know, what is the size of micron?
Micron?
Yes, micron.
That's a good question. I think 1 micron is thousandth part of a millimeter.
Okay. Guaf would like to know how to configure EtCO2 settings, please.
What EtCO2 settings?
Yes, Guaf, maybe you would like to be a bit more specific, please, so we can answer your question. Just a moment, Christian. There is nothing coming, no addition at the moment. In the meantime, I would like to...
As soon as you plug in EtCO2, EtCO2 is running after you have calibrated the CO2 capnometer. The values are monitoring values, so if you want to have EtCO2 as a monitoring value, so you just go here, and then EtCO2 would be displayed. The same with the curve. So everything is just there. If you want to see EtCO2 or CO2 here, it will be just displayed in a way. And we have additional also volumetric CO2 like dead space, and they can just be also taken over from the menu. So this would be the dead space calculation. So the values are already there. And as soon as you plug in the CO2 mainstream, you will get all those values immediately.
So thanks for that answer. Shinmai would like to know, is there any minimum configuration of PC or laptop to open bellavista file? I have installed iVista in my PC, then also facing problem.
No, the software itself is a very small software, and I think it would. I think it runs on every laptop or PC. But potentially, you might need to install another software coming from Microsoft, the Microsoft Runtime software. And on some laptops, and we found this out, especially on YR laptops, you need to have this additional software, and then it will run properly. So maybe check for the message the program is giving you, but if the installation was done properly, there shouldn't be any performance issues with any laptop, because it's a very, very small software program.
Naveen would like to know, how many parameters can you see on a screen at one time?
Depending on the screen you're choosing. So on the cockpit, you can see up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 12, 16. On the expert monitoring, it will be much, much more. And it will be, I think, 46 or 48. And it's really depending on the screen you want to use.
Thank you.
But just be aware, a human being can't compute more than 4 parameters at once. So don't set up the screen for clinicians or users with numerous parameters. I would always recommend to have as less parameters, but the right parameters, because no one can compute more than 4 parameters at a time.
All right. And another question here from Mohammed. How often do membranes of the exhaled valve be sterilized?
We leave this up to the hospital and to the hygienic protocols of the hospital. So if they say we do it after each patient, fine. When they say we do it every 7 days, even if the patient is still ventilated, fine. We leave this up to the hospitals.
Mm-hmm. And who would like to know now, please, which technology, as per your experience, is better for neonatal ventilation? Turbine-based or air compressor-based, and why?
It's difficult to answer question. It just, I think there shouldn't be a huge difference. Usually leakage compensation, but this is not too important in the field of neonatal ventilation because the flows and the amount of air or leakage is quite high. So also compressed ventilators can cope with that. And if they are working with flow and constant flow concept, yeah, this is not so easy to answer. So I would say, to make it simple, there are very good turbine ventilators out there in the market, and there are not so good turbine ventilators out in the market, and there are very good compressed air ventilators out in the market, and there are also not so good compressed air. So it's not a question of technology, it's a question of how you use the technology. And even recommended ventilators and very popular ventilators in the world are performance-wise not as good as everyone might think, and there are some ventilators out in the world which are performance-wise really good, but I wouldn't tie that to the technology. So yeah, it's a very difficult to answer question because there's so many parameters which define performance, so you just can't say turbine is better. Turbine can be better, compressed air can be better, but that's not tied to the technology. That's how you construct and how you engineer it.
All right. And now Xin-Mei would like to know, do we have a facility to monitor oxygen inlet pressure?
To monitor oxygen inlet pressure? Yeah, not directly on the cockpit or during ventilation, but you can see this in the service menu.
Right. And a question from Govind, please. If I want to control bellavista remotely from outside the isolation room, is it possible by any means?
No, not at the moment.
Thanks. Next question is coming now from Grace. Will the active humidification and HME option mentioned earlier that is available for the States soon be available for Europe?
Yes. I think the next software update, which was planned this summer, but because of COVID-19, everything has been postponed. So I currently can't tell when we will have the software update, but then the software update will include this active passive humidification switch as well, yes. Thanks
for your answer, Christian. This was the last question. No other questions from you, dear participants? Here is one coming. Oh, two, okay. One moment. So you would like to know, how is the increment of 0.01 milliliters in the neonatal category delivered with bellavista series? This question is specifically asked because this is a very low increment with turbine.
Yes. We have our uncertainties. So these are in a percentage range, which you can see on the user manual, and we are bound to be in that range. So the same applies to, which is also something which is quite tricky. If you go to HFOT, I go back, sorry, I go to Neonatal, HFOT, and I could set a flow of 1 liter per minute with 23% of oxygen. This is also very, very tricky because 1 liter flow is just a bit more than nothing. And we also managed to mix this with the oxygen setting. So we would be inside the range of the uncertainty, and even with these settings. But of course, if you set a PEEP of 5.8, that PEEP might not necessarily be exact at that point. That's true, but therefore we have the uncertainty, which is explained in the user manual. Because just to add, there are many turbine concepts out there with no inspiration valve. And that's the reason why they can't be that precise. But as soon as you have an inspiration valve, you have the ability to be more precise than that. And if you have a flow sensor on the patient side as well.
Thank you, Christian. And can you now please tell us, this is for Sayi again, the particle size of the aerosol during nebulization?
That's not up to the bellavista. So bellavista is just delivering 8 liters of additional flow for the nebulizer. So if you want to know the particle size, you have to go for the instructions of the nebulizers you want to use.
And does the BV series employ inspiratory valve?
Yes.
Yes, it does. Okay, thank you very much. Now there is a question from Guav. If the patient on ventilator and turbine stops working, so can we use bellavista?
Say again.
If the patient on ventilator and turbine stops working, so can we use bellavista?
No. When the turbine stops, it's the same as you would throw out the ventilator out of the window, then it's over. But there will be a lot of alarms when this happens, and we had in certain conditions also problems with the turbine, especially when there was no filter exchange, when it was in a very hot condition, so that the turbine overheated. And as soon as this happens, the ventilator is not able to work anymore.
Thanks a lot. And dear participants, also thanks a lot for this very intensive question and answer session. Really, really good. I hope we could answer all your questions. This would be it for the part of the training now. And as already said, you can download the recording here of this webinar to watch the whole video again then from the Vision Training Center. Christian, anything from your side still before we finish?
No, no. That's it. A lot of questions, a lot of very interesting, good questions, and yes. I'm happy to have answered most of them. And yeah, I hope we can carry on soon with the next webinars. And thank you for attending, and hope to hear you soon again.
Great. Good, thanks. So, dear participants, as already said at the beginning, there is a survey where I'm asking for your feedback, and the questions are displayed on the right side now, please. It would be very kind of you if you could take another 1 or 2 minutes to answer the questions, please, and give us your feedback about our webinar classes. So then the training is over, and as soon as we have arranged more webinar classes, you will be informed by email sent from our training.eu email address. It would be great to welcome you in another webinar again, and yeah, hope to hear and talk to you soon again. Take good care, stay healthy, and have a nice rest of the day. Thanks and goodbye.